everyone, it's your audio angel here, and today we are doing another getting to know video. Today we are focusing on the mischievous tiefling Phoebe. In this video we're going to be talking about her character design, some of her memorable moments, and her backstory. So without further ado, let's get started. So Phoebe is actually the third character I ever created. I created her during a campaign at a card shop. My friend had just introduced me to D&D. I'd played a few times with Twig, but I wanted to make a new character that was kind of the opposite of Twig, and that ended up being this rebellious, doesn't get along well with people, tiefling girl. So I had the idea of a tiefling, and then I was looking at sorcerers because I wanted to play a sorcerer and it looked fun, and the only rule book that I found was for Dragonblood sorcerers. And I was looking at the options and I saw that white dragon was ice. And I was like, well, tieflings are red. And red and white for the white dragon makes pink. So it would be really cool to have a pink tiefling that has like white scale freckles and not only has fire powers from her tiefling heritage, but ice powers from her dragonborn heritage. I thought that having the two sides of the coin was really cool, having opposite elements, one melting, one freezing. So I literally came up with her pink skin and her fire and ice within the span of 5 minutes just because of what the options were laid out before me, and it ended up making one of my favorite designs. And that first game that I played her in and created her for was the game that inspired me to become a DM and actually DM my own games. I went on to make a couple of one-shots, a couple of campaigns, and I'm doing a full campaign right now. But I wouldn't have thought I could do it until I played that game. And then I was like, wait, I could do this. This is easy. You know, you just gotta try and you just gotta do it. So it inspired me to just put myself out there, and I ended up really liking DMing a lot. You can see them in some videos, but some videos I just didn't put them in there because I imagine that these freckles are so small that she's just kind of shimmery in some light. But she does have white dragon scales kind of freckled across her skin. I imagine her scales are really sparkly. So she's this pink, sparkly, fiery tiefling girl. She also has bright blue eyes. The whites of her eyes are actually a blue, and they glow in the dark when she's in the dark areas. I leave it up to the DM of why. I think it's just because tieflings look cooler with eyes that glow in the dark, but if the DM's like they don't glow in the dark naturally, then I just say she uses thaumaturgy anytime she's in a dark place to make her eyes glow bright, just for that intimidation tactic, and she thinks it looks cool. And of course her accent colors are purple because red and blue, which is the fire and the ice, make purple, so that's why she wears purple a lot, and purple is probably her favorite color besides pink. For her outfit, it's pretty simple. I built her on Hero Forged, and I ended up using that clothing style for her. She has the purple pants, she has the black corset, and she has the purple cape. And on her cape, there is a red jewel, and that red jewel is her arcane focus for her sorcery powers. I use that as the clip on her cape, just so it's close to her heart, so she knows where it is. And of course, she always wants black leather boots. She thinks they look awesome. She thinks they look cool. She wouldn't be herself if she didn't have her tall black leather boots. The base of her tail is a little bit spiked, kind of like a dragon's is, and her tail's thicker than most tieflings because of the dragon blood in her. So she has like a mix of a tiefling tail and a dragon tail. And I also made the spike on her tail, instead of making it very pointy and angular, I made it into a little heart shape because I thought, why not? It's cute and I like it. And if anything, I imagine when she was going through her rebellious phase, she could have totally clipped the tips of her tail to make it look more heart-shaped. Even if it hurts, she wanted to be cooler, so she did a little rebellious thing like getting your ear pierced, and said she clipped the ends of her tail to make a heart. Being my third character is a very special thing to me because 3 is actually my favorite number. But that number also comes with bad luck. 3 is very bad luck for me whenever I see a 3 or whenever something is third and I'm using it, it's going to bring bad luck. Something's going to go wrong. It's how it is. So with that, there were some complications with playing Phoebe. So we're going to get into those of Phoebe's bad luck streaks. So the campaign that I played at the card shop, I ended up only playing one session. But I ended up running into one of my friends who happened to be a DM, and he was playing the same day, and he asked me to join one of his games because he didn't know that I played. I hadn't seen him in years, and I didn't know he played, and so we exchanged information, and we met up, and I started playing in his campaign. And in his campaign, Phoebe found a little mimic. We had fought a big mimic in the Feywild. Phoebe found a baby mimic within the big mimic, and she got to keep it, and she named it Douglas. And Douglas was her baby. Every time they fight, she would feed it remains of whatever they fought, because we did a lot of fights in his campaign. She would try to teach it tricks. She would try to, talk to it, try to teach it to talk. When it was disguised on her person, it was a coin purse. As it got bigger, it became a cape. And Phoebe had a mimic cape for a while, and that was really cool. She loved that. She thought it was the coolest thing ever. Sadly, the whole campaign took place in the Feywild, and when you leave the Feywild, you have to roll a check, and you can forget everything that happened in the Feywild once you leave to the other side. Well, we finished the campaign, so we're leaving the Feywild, and as we leave, Phoebe rolls a check, and she forgets everything. All of her character development, all the things she learned, all the friends she made along the way, she forgets everything, which was really sad. But what was worse is that her mimic also failed the check and forgot everything, so it started to eat her. They had a small fight, but the mimic ended up running away in the forest. That was the DM gracing me that the mimic was still alive and got to live happily, but it was no longer with Phoebe. So then Phoebe left and, again, lost all her character development. And that was sad. So then, in the next campaign that I played her in, I had told my DM, I was like, hey, in this previous game, Phoebe had a mimic, and it was really cool. I'd love to have a baby mimic. And they were like, okay, you can get a baby mimic. And I was like, awesome. So we have a mimic fight in the middle of this underground gnome area, and one of our players gets swallowed by the mimic. So everybody's fighting it. She gets out. She's alive. She's safe. And as Phoebe's digging through the remains of this mimic, she also finds a baby mimic, and she's excited. But before she even gets a chance to think about naming it, the whole party gets very defensive, and they're like, you gotta kill that thing. It's gonna grow up to be a monster. It's gonna grow up and eat everybody. And the character that got swallowed showed no mercy to it. She's like, you gotta kill that thing. I will kill it myself. And Phoebe got very defensive, very offended, because she has this thing where she is seen as a monster because of what race she is. She thinks that them immediately wanting to kill the mimic just because of what it is, rather than giving it a fighting chance to be something better than it is, really offended her. And so she was very upset with the party for a long time. And the sad part is the character that got swallowed not only threw the mimic off a cliff, but when it started floating down the river, shot an arrow at it to make sure that it was dead. And it was a critical hit. So that thing exploded. So that was very sad. It was very awkward afterwards when they all realized that this is an item I requested. And everyone felt really bad. And I was like, hey, it's okay. Do what your characters do. I'm always that way when it comes to D&D. Do what your character would do. It made sense. And having a mimic would probably be complicated with that group anyway, because that group didn't get along anyways. The players, we all love each other. The characters, it was all angst. All the every single, how angsty and sarcastic Phoebe is. Think of the whole party being that way and all being defensive and not trusting everybody. That was the group. We did not function well. So that's bad luck number one. The second thing is that Phoebe constantly was almost dying. And sure, that happens when you're a sorcerer, but she was always on the brink of death almost every fight. And there was one time where we were going through a dungeon, and it was me and my friend's character, Dodgic. Dodgic is a dragonborn cleric, and he's a healer. Well, I didn't see a trap door that made into a pitfall, and so Phoebe fell and suffered fall damage. The problem is that we had already been fighting a bunch of things, so that dropped her to 0 HP. My friend's character, Dodgic, goes into the pit slowly, able to get to her, and tries to heal her, and it doesn't work because he has no spell slots, and he tried medicine checks and got nat 1s. And so she's dying, and I'm rolling death saves, and we're all freaking out like Phoebe's going to die just because she fell. So I rolled like a 7 and then a 3, which was already 2 failed death saves. And then I rolled a 16, and then I rolled a 12, so that was 2 successes. So it was all up to this last roll, and I rolled a 10. So she survived, but just barely. The second death that was the most memorable and biggest death was during a fight with some orcs. Our team had just wiped out an entire clan of these goblins that were part of this bad guy group. And these orcs come by and say, hey, these were our brethren. We're going to fight you, but we're going to fight you respectfully. We won't kill any of you, but once you're down to 1 HP, get down and stay down. If you heal anybody, then you are dishonorable and we will kill you. So we all agreed. The orc character in our group that was one of our strongest fighters got down. So he was down on 1 knee. And our changeling was yelling at him, saying to get up. Like, we're going to fight them to the death. So he gets up, and then the orcs get so mad. And so they decide to slaughter us. And Phoebe, they sick their wolves on her, so she's being held down by these wolves. And then the orc comes and takes their great axe and chops off her head. But it's hanging on just barely, but they basically chop her neck in half. And so the party freaks out. They end up killing the orcs. They ended up having a revivify scroll. So they just had enough to revive her. They made our cleric Dodgic roll because he was the one using the scroll. And he rolled, and it failed. There was silence across the table, and I'm like, hey, it's okay. If this is how she was meant to die, this is how it's meant to be. It's okay. I'll make a new character. I'm not offended. And he said no, and his player used a inspiration point to re-roll. And I think he ended up having to use 2 points of inspiration, which were his last 2. He was able to revive Phoebe. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that situation ended after I talk a little bit more about her backstory. I wanted to mention a couple more memorable moments. One of them is that Phoebe had a drinking contest with an orc before and she won. If she tries to give a high five to somebody and they don't respond, she will mage hand a high five to high five herself. Phoebe also likes listening to music, so what she does is she casts thaumaturgy on the tips of her fingers and then plugs her ears and uses that as headphones to play rock music for herself, just so she doesn't bother anybody. But she'll be like headbanging with her ears plugged, and people will look at her like she's crazy. But now we are on to the backstory. Before all of Phoebe's adventures, she was this very well-mannered people pleaser who did everything her mother told her to make people be kinder to her because she is a tiefling. In her town, tieflings were kind of seen as a lower class. If they behaved well, they were welcomed into society for the most part, but they had to constantly watch themselves so that they weren't seen as a monster. On top of that, she was a sorcerer, and so she was seen as a threat. She was seen as dangerous because she had these powers that, even though she could control them, who knows when she might go off, and so people kept extra distance, and her mom was like, hey, don't use magic, like, keep it to yourself, like, don't step out of line. And Phoebe did. She did everything she was told and was miserable. And one day, she sees this green tiefling with red eyes, and ripped jeans and sleeveless shirt, beating up some guards because the guards tried to bully him and he wasn't having it. So he just started pounding on them with no hesitation and really sticking up for himself. And Phoebe fell in love at first sight. She's like, wow, I wish I had enough confidence to stand up for myself like he's doing right now, and enough power and strength to be able to fight against the people who are rude to us. And so he ends up running down an alleyway, and she follows him, and she stops him and says, hey, I really liked what you did. I thought that was really cool. You're a really cool person. And then all of a sudden, soldiers start coming down the alleyway. And so Phoebe uses ice knife to make the ground slippery in front of them and grabs his hand and runs off in a direction because she knows these alleys well. And he instantly sees her as an ally. He sees her as a powerful ally. And so he happily introduces himself as Zach. He starts telling her, wow, like, you have powers, that's so cool. And oh, what I'd kill to have powers like yours. And I bet you're really, really strong. And starts just immediately flattering her and trying to get her to see his side. And she's falling for it quickly because, oh, no one's accepted those parts of myself. You accept that I'm a tiefling. You accept that I'm a sorcerer. You accept that I'm powerful and strong. That's amazing because I've been told my whole life to push that down and don't feel that. Eventually, Zach convinces her to stand up for themselves against the normies. And normies are humanoid races that look human. So like humans, elves, dwarves, gnomes. He was saying how they're being oppressed by these normies, that Zach is a advocate for fighting against them to benefit their people and other monster races that get bad rep. And of course, he starts small with her. He starts with little heists here and there just to test out her powers, just to train her, and then eventually gets into using magic missile against people and using fire against people and ice. To put it in simpler terms, she was one extreme side of the coin, which was people pleasing and letting people walk all over her and letting people do whatever they want. And then now to the other extreme of not letting anybody tell her what to do, not caring about any other people but her and Zach, and taking whatever she wants. She went from one extreme to another, which was really unhealthy for her. In the end, they ended up doing many heists together, but the one that matters is the one we're going to talk about, which was that fateful night she left Zach for dead. So the heist was to go to a general store, pocket what they could, get all the cash in the cash register in the middle of the night, and run. So Phoebe's pocketing everything she can, pots, pans, supply kits, and as she's grabbing a music box, the door swings open, and a dwarven man is standing there, and they hide behind the counter because he has a gun, and he starts shooting at them. He's already called the guards, they're going to close in soon, and he's threatening to turn them in or kill them. Phoebe's freaking out. Zach slaps her and says, hey, focus. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. If they're going to try to take us down, they're going down with us. And so he sets the whole place on fire. And Zach just ends up saying, shoot him, just shoot him, just shoot him with a magic missile, kill him. And we don't have to worry about this. So she does. She magic missiles him and he falls dead to the floor. And in the doorway is a little dwarven girl who's watching with wide eyes. And Phoebe realizes that she just killed this girl's father. He was just protecting his shop from people who were stealing it, and now he is dead, and it's their fault, and his shop is burning to the ground, and he's losing literally everything, including his life, and his family has to suffer for it now. And at this point, she realizes what a terrible person Zach is. The terrible things that he's doing to these innocent people just for the sake of what race they are. They're not being any better than the other side. So as he goes to barricade the door, she runs the opposite way, breaks through a window, and runs into the forest. And she hears him calling out to her, calling for her name, telling her to come back, and then she hears a gunshot, and she hears silence. Phoebe just keeps running. She runs, and she realizes that there's nowhere she can go because she's wanted. She's a wanted criminal. She doesn't know who she can trust. She doesn't even trust herself. At this point, Zach starts haunting her, constantly belittling her, constantly nagging her, constantly telling her how horrible she is because of the things she's done and that no one will trust her ever again. So that's how she starts adventuring, is because she realizes that in order for her to combat the things that she's done, she has to bring good back into the world. She wants to make a difference in the world, and if she's going to die, it's going to be doing something big to help other people. She has a hard time having relationships because she's constantly reminded that she left her relationship for dead. And so she has a hard time trusting other people because she doesn't want to hurt them, rather than she's worried about them hurting her. But I hope that she will grow and learn from those mistakes and learn to trust people and learn to trust herself. She just wants to be liked and accepted for who she is. Going back to when she got her head chopped off, in that campaign, Zach hadn't started haunting her yet. But when she died, she went to one of the 9 hells and woke up laying next to him, and him just smiling at her and being like, you can finally be home, you can be with me. And she was terrified because she realized, she was hoping that in death she would escape him, but then at that point she realized that she could not escape him in death, that he was going to be there constantly. And the revivify spell was a bright light, and she could either reach for the light or reach for Zach's hand, and so she reached for the light and came back, and her neck got fixed. But then when she woke up and looked onwards into the shadows, that's when she saw his ghost, and that's when he started haunting her in that campaign. And at this point, she's trying to find a way to get rid of Zach forever, whether it's to be accepted by some god that will make her go to a heaven instead of a hell, or some powerful entity that can erase Zach forever. So that's her goal now. Her other goal, of course, is to, again, make good in the world, make a difference in the world. So she has to kind of juggle those things. That is all I think I have time to share. I think I shared quite a bit, but I care a lot about her, and I want her to be happy, and I want her to find love, even if that love is just loving herself. I hope you have a fantastic day, a fantastic night, and I wish you the best. Thank you for watching.